In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do all of the steps and parts for your Algebra 1 final statistics project. So I'm going to be working with the set of data we used in class for our sample project, which is about Algebra 2 grades. So chances are you've seen me work with this data before and you've done it yourself. You're going to be doing these same steps with your own set of data that you've chosen for your project. So keep in mind that some things will be different, the numbers will be different, the amount of data you have will be different, the title will be different, but all of the steps you're going to do to create your project is going to be the same. Everyone at the top of their sheet has this red text that says number of blanks. Right now it says 14. This is talking about all of the yellow boxes we're going to have to fill in as we go through each part. And once you're done, it will instead of saying 14 blanks, it'll say 0 blanks. That's how you know you're done. So that number will go down as you work on the project, okay? So for part 1, we're going to make a histogram. So again, if you're watching this and you're trying to follow the steps on your project, feel free to pause, to rewind. If you want to see me do something again or hear me say something again, you need to pause it and rewind it. I'm not going to repeat things too many times during the video because the whole point of the video is you can pause it and rewind it as much as you need. Okay, so I'm going to be following these steps. So if you're ever confused, also, make sure you're reading the steps on your own project because I'm carrying out those same exact steps. And I'll mention when things will be a little different depending on your data. So to make a histogram, first we need to highlight the whole A column, starting with where it says Algebra 2 grades at the top, all the way down to the 52nd row to include all of the data. So again, for your data, it might not be the 52nd row, it might be farther than that or less than that, but either way, you're going to highlight all of the data. So always start with the first row where the title is. We do want to include that title when we're highlighting because we want to use that title in our histogram. So to highlight, you're going to click and then hold down your mouse and drag all the way down to highlight all of the data in blue. So I clicked starting with row 1 where it says Algebra 2 grades. I held my mouse down and dragged all the way down to where I see the last number. And in this case, mine is in the 52nd row, and now it's highlighted blue. So once you have that highlighted in blue, you're going to click Insert, and then you're going to click Chart. And it's going to give you a histogram right away. So now I'm going to move the histogram over here to where it says Insert Histogram here, so you should do the same thing. If you want to make it smaller, you can, but you don't have to. It should fit here as long as you're not covering up anything. Make sure it's just fitting nicely in that spot. You don't really need to make it smaller, okay? Now, you might notice if you click here and try and type in this, it's going to tell you that you can't edit it. So keep in mind throughout this sheet, the only things you're allowed to edit are the things you should edit. If you try to double click and type somewhere and it doesn't let you, that's because you're not supposed to be able to. So you don't need to have any protections removed. You don't need to contact me. If you're trying to edit something that's protected, that means you're not supposed to change it. So all of the steps, if you try and edit them, it won't let you because I don't want you to lose the steps. Same with the data. It won't let you edit it, so you can't possibly, lose the data, click something wrong. It will not go anywhere because you cannot edit it. It's all protected. So just keep that in mind as we're going through. If you see that pop up, just click OK. You probably clicked the wrong thing. Okay, so now that we've got our chart, we just did steps 1 and 2. Step 3, we need to edit the histogram. Okay, so the reason we want to edit the histogram is right now it is sorting the grades in groups of 15. So the x-axis is going from 0 to 15 to 30 to 45 and so on. And the reason we want to change it is because this data is about grades. We want to think about what this data is about. Okay, it doesn't even make sense because it's going up to 105 and we know that we're not going to have any grades going above 100. So we want to adjust this so that it makes more sense for our data. And when I think about grades, I'm thinking about, okay, well, usually we have grades sorted by letters. So like to get an A, you get from a 90 to a 100. To get a B, you get from an 80 to a 90. To get a C, you have to get between a 70 and an 80. Those are all in groups of a size of 10. So right now ours is going by 15s. We don't like that because grades are normally going by 10s. So we are going to adjust this so that it's going by tens and also so that it doesn't have anything above 100 on the x-axis, okay? So in order to edit the histogram, we're going to right-click on the histogram. Now, if you're on a Chromebook, I believe a right-click is like a two-finger click. So it might depend on what type of computer you're using, however you do a right-click. You're going to right-click and then choose Chart Style. Okay, and when you choose chart style, it's going to pull up this menu on the right, which is what we're going to use for steps 4 and 5 to edit this. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. It's covering up the histogram a little bit. You can scroll to the right if you want. So once we pull that up, we want to scroll down and click on the section titled horizontal axis. This is step 4. So scroll down in this menu, click on the section that says horizontal axis. And then it says to type in 0 under min and 100 under max. Okay, now keep in mind on yours, it might have different numbers that you're typing in for min and max because you're using different data. Not everyone's data is about grades. Some of the data is about Instagram followers, height, things like that. So you're going to see different numbers there, and they'll be highlighted so you can notice very closely that it's different. So make sure you're looking at your sheet to see what number you're supposed to type in under min and max. So for this one, it's 0 and 100. Okay, so I type in a 0 under min, 100 under max. The steps are the same, again, as mine. It's just that the number you're typing in might be different. Okay, so step 5 says now on the same menu, we're going to scroll back up and click the section titled Histogram so we can change the bucket sizes. So these are the bucket sizes right now. It did change a little bit when we went from 0 to 100, but it's still not counting by tens. We want the buckets to count by tens. So we're going to, where it says bucket size, right now it says auto, we're going to change it to 10 because we want the buckets to count by tens. So now it's going 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Okay? If you're missing the last number, it's okay. That might just be because you resized it a little smaller. As long as it's counting by whatever yours is supposed to count by. Again, it might not be going by tens. Yours might say choose 25 or 5, okay? It depends on your data. So the steps are the same, but just make sure you're reading your steps to see what you're supposed to choose under bucket size, okay? Now we're done with that. We can X out of the chart editor. We don't need it anymore. We are done with part 1. We've made our histogram. We've edited it. Now it's going by tens. We like how it looks. It's going from 0 to 100. Makes sense. Okay, now we're going to go on to part 2, which is calculating the 5-number summary. For this, we're going to be typing in the yellow boxes above each of the 5 numbers we need, the minimum, the Q1, median, Q3, and maximum. So you're going to be typing in these same boxes on your sheet. You're going to follow the same steps as me in terms of what you're typing and highlighting the data. Of course, your data is different. You might have a different amount. That's fine. If you forget what to type, that's what these steps are here for. So step 1 is above where it says minimum, type equals capital M-I-N. So equals capital M-I-N. Okay, then I'm going to click enter, and it gives me this little parenthesis here. So equals capital M-I-N for minimum, click enter. Then I'm going to highlight the whole A column starting with row 2. So this time we are not going to highlight the title at the top. We just want to start with the very first number we see, whatever number that is for you. Start there and then click and drag. This time it's an orange colored highlight. Click and drag all the way to your very last number. For me, that's the 52nd row. For you, it's probably a different row, but highlight all of the data just like that. And then you're going to click enter. So you might be like, oh, where did what we typed go? It disappeared. Well, first of all, what we just did was we told the sheet to calculate the minimum. We told it to tell us what's the minimum. So that's what it did. Now in that box, it's telling us the minimum is 0. If you want to remember what you typed, you can click on that box where it says 0. And if you look up here in the kind of like white menu section, it actually has exactly what we typed. Equals min, the parenthesis, and then this is what it got from our highlight. Okay, so if you're wondering like where that went, it's still there. It's just not what we see anymore because the whole point of that was to tell us what the minimum is. Okay, now of course the minimum you could have done maybe easily just by looking with your eyeballs. What's the lowest number? This is already sorted from low to high. All of the data and everyone's sheet is already sorted from low to high, so you kind of could have figured that out anyway. But the quartile one would definitely be very hard to figure out on your own. So we definitely need to be using these steps. So number 2, above where it says Q1, we're going to type equals quartile, Q-U-A-R-T-I-L-E, all capitals. If you forget how to spell it, it's right there in step 2. Then we're going to click enter. Okay. Then once again, we're going to highlight our data. Don't worry that the cell moves around. It just does that. I think it's just to help us always be able to see it. Even when we scroll around, we can still see that cell. It doesn't actually move it. It'll go right back to where it was. So we click and drag, starting with the very first number of our data all the way to the last one. Then we're going to click enter. Oh, before we click enter, we have to tell it to calculate quartile 1. So before we click enter, we're going to type a comma and then a 1. So a comma and then a 1. That tells us, that's us telling it to calculate quartile 1 as opposed to like quartile 3. Okay, so we highlighted and then we typed comma 1. Now we're going to click enter and it tells us that the quartile 1 value is 67.5. Again, if you click on that cell, you can see what we had typed, the quartile, the highlighted part, and then the comma 1. It's all up there. So now we'll do the median. You're going to probably get the hang of this because it's all very similar. Type equals median, capital M-E-D-I-A-N. Again, if you forget, it's right up here in step 3. Click enter. Gives us the parenthesis. Now we're going to highlight all of our data just like before, starting with the very first number we see all the way to the last one. And then we can just go ahead and click enter, and it's going to tell us that the median is 90. Keep in mind, your numbers are going to be different from mine. Like, you're not going to be getting the same minimum median in Q1 as me because you have completely different data. So you can't really compare if your numbers are right, but you can still follow the same steps for your data. It's going to give you different numbers, though. Now for quartile 3, type equals quartile. Click enter. Okay. And then we are going to highlight from row 2 all the way again to row 52 for me, but for you it might be different. And then before we click enter, now we want to tell it to type quartile 3. So we're going to type a comma and a 3 so that we tell it to calculate quartile 3. Then click enter. There it is. Quartile 3 is 95.5 for me. Okay. Last one is the maximum. So equals capital M-A-X. Now this brings up a really important thing to remind you. If you ever see this suggested with the little green star when you type in equals and then whatever we're calculating, if you ever see that, don't click enter because we don't want to ever select the suggested one. It's like always trying to trick us. We don't ever want to click that suggested with the green star next to it. That is never what we're looking for. So if that ever pops up, instead of clicking enter, just take your mouse and hover over the one that just says max and click that. So instead of clicking enter, you can't click enter because it's going to give you this suggested one with the green star, which is not what we want. So we have to just hover over the one that just says max and then click that. That's what we want. Okay, so if that ever happens, just be careful. Don't hit enter if you see the suggested with the green star. Hover over the one that just says what you're looking for, in this case just the one that says max, and click that. So now it gives us our parenthesis, and again, once again, we're going to click and highlight all of our data, and then click enter. Gives us the max of 100. Now we can go ahead and do a quick check. Go to the top. Now we only have 9 blanks left to go. It was 14 before, but we just got these 5 done. So again, it's going to be 0 when we're done. Okay. So if you need to watch any of that again, just rewind it. I'm going to go on to part 3, which is about shape, variability, and center. So for this, we're going to need to be referring to our histogram to answer some of these questions. We're also going to refer to the data on the left. Okay. So first we want to describe the shape of the data and what it means. We want to use 2 words from the word bank. Okay. Our word bank includes symmetric, skewed left, skewed right, unimodal, bimodal, multimodal, and uniform. So first we want to pick a word to describe this symmetry. Okay, so I want to choose whether it's symmetric, skewed left, or skewed right. So when I look at my data, I see that I have most of the data is on the right. We can see we have a really tall bar over on the right, and then we don't have as much data on the left. Okay, so that's what we call skewed left, when it's this shape where we have less data on the left and more data on the right. So the data is skewed left because there is less data on the left, which we sometimes call a tail, and more data on the right. Okay, So that's the first thing I'm going to say. So whichever word you choose, you just need to explain what it means. So in this case, skewed left, that means there's less data on the left and more data on the right. So I can tell it's skewed left. And then I also want to choose a word to describe how many peaks it has. So that's going to be choosing either unimodal, bimodal, multimodal, or uniform. Well, in this case, it's skewed left. There's only one peak over on the right side. If there's only one peak, that's the word unimodal. So I'm going to say the data is also unimodal because there is only one peak on the right side. Okay. So again, for yours, like, you can't just copy what I just typed. Like, yours isn't necessarily the same shape. Like, you might have symmetric one, you might have a skewed right. You gotta answer based on what you have and explain it in the right way for you. Okay, you don't have to use the same exact words as me, whatever makes sense to you. Okay. Now I'm going to go on to number 2, where I have to calculate the IQR, the lower fence, and the upper fence, and then determine if there are any outliers. Okay, so I have already reminded you of the formula for each of these, which is really nice. So the first thing we need to calculate is the IQR. Now this is the only time we're going to have to really do some calculating on our own, and so I've given you a link to the Desmos Scientific Calculator. We can click that, pull it up in a new tab. That's going to just be there for us to calculate each of these. So first we want to calculate the IQR. We should remember, but I still have it written for you here, that the formula is Q3 minus Q1. See, can't edit that. So we're going to type in this yellow box, Q3 minus Q1. So remember, we just calculated Q3 and Q1. Q3 is 95.5. Q1 is 67.5. So in my calculator, I'm just going to do 95.5 minus 67.5. So again, your numbers are different, but you're doing your Q3 minus your Q1. This gives up me 28 for the IQR, so now I'm going to type 28 right here. So you don't need to show your work in there, you just need to calculate it and then type your answer here. And then for the lower fence, we're going to do Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. So again, let's go back and look at what our Q1 was. It's 67.5 minus 1.5 times the IQR, which we just found is 28. So I'm going to type in my calculator, 67.5 minus 1.5 times the IQR, which we just found is 28. That gives me 25.5 as my lower fence. Now to calculate the upper fence, do Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. We just found that Q3 is 95.5. So I'm going to type 95.5 plus 1.5 times the IQR, which we again already found was 28. That gives us an upper fence of 137.5. Okay. I should have mentioned that if at any point you type in a yellow box and like up here, if you were typing and then like it gave you an error, you can always just click the box, click delete or backspace, and then start over from fresh. Like if something weird happens, just try again, start from fresh. Okay, so now we are going to use this information to determine if there are any outliers. Okay, so we're going to answer yes or no. If we say yes, state which values are the outliers and how we know. If we say no, then state how we know. So remember what we've learned in class is that any numbers below the lower fence are considered outliers, and then any numbers above the upper fence are considered outliers. So I'm going to start with looking at my lower fence, which is 25.5. I need to know if there are any numbers below 25.5 in my data, because those would be considered outliers. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, go look at the histogram. I see 0 and 10. That's not where we actually want to look for this. You can definitely tell there are going to be outliers, but it's better for us to find the exact values of the outliers. We want to actually look at our list of data over on the left. So I'm going to actually look at this list of data and look for any numbers below my lower fence, 25.5. Well, I see 0, 0, 0, and 22.5. Those are all below my lower fence. Okay, those are all numbers below the lower fence, 25.5. So those are all outliers. So I have 4 outliers below my lower fence, and I'm going to list them 0, 0, 0, and 22.5. So there are 4 outliers below the lower fence of 25.5. 0, 0, 0, and 22.5. Then I also want to see if there are any outliers above my upper fence of 137.5. So I'm going to, again, scroll down. Do I see any numbers above 137.5? Nope, because my highest number is 100. There are no outliers above the upper fence of 137.5 because our maximum grade is 100. So I just stated the outliers I found below the lower fence and then no outliers above the upper fence. So again, going to be different depending on your data, but make sure you're looking at the list of numbers on the left to find your outliers. Don't look at the histogram, okay? So now, I mean, we can see in the histogram, now that we've listed them, we can see that our outliers are here and here in these two bars. But to get the exact values, we need to look at that list. Now we're going to, number 3, calculate the mean and mean absolute deviation. So for the mean, it tells us in this box next to me, we're going to type equals average in all caps. So this is very similar to how we did our 5-number summary. Type equals average, then click enter, and then highlight all of the data and click enter. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly what we did before, highlight all the data in orange. Okay. And then I'm going to click enter. It tells me my mean is 77.7. I definitely don't want any autofill because I don't know what it's doing. If it ever pops up in autofill, just click the X. We don't want that. Okay, so that tells us our mean is 77.7. All right, then we also want to do the MAD. That's the mean absolute deviation. To do that, we type equals AVE-DEV. So it's like average deviation, but shorted. So AVE-DEV. Click enter, and then once again, click and drag all of this data. And then we're going to click enter. So it tells us our MAD is 21.4. Okay, so now step 4, we're going to determine the best measure of center. So based on the shape of the data, should you use the mean or the median to describe the center, and explain how you chose. Remember, if the data is skewed, we should use the median. If it is symmetric, use the mean. So we already said our data is skewed left. So since the data is skewed left, we will use the median as the best measure of center. Okay, this also makes sense because let's go back. We should probably say what the median is. The median is 90. The mean is 77.7. So let's go back to our histogram. 90, the median would be like right here. 77.7 as the mean is over here. And if you look at those, the median is definitely closer to where most of the data is. The mean, 77.7 right here, it definitely is not where most of the data is, okay? It's definitely not the best measure of center. So we should also say the median is 90, while the mean is 77.7. By looking at the histogram, 90 is clearly closer to most of the data in the histogram than the mean. So however you want to say that is fine. This will be fixed on yours. But if that ever happens where it cuts you off, go to Format, Text Wrapping, and click Wrap. But yours should be automatically like that when you get on your sheet anyway, okay? So however you want to say it, make sure you tell me which one is better and why, and then tell me the value. So like the median is 90, and that's a better measure of center. Just by looking at the histogram, we can tell. Of course, if you have symmetric data, then you'd be using the mean. So you really have to make the decision based on your data. And then number 5, we want to determine the best measure of variability. So again, based on the shape of the data, we're going to decide whether we should use the IQR or the MAD. And a little hint, if the data is skewed, use the IQR. If it's symmetric, use MAD. Well, once again, since the data is skewed left, we already said that, we will use the IQR as the best measure of center. So median and IQR always go together. Mean and MAD always go together. So the IQR is 28. We had calculated that, which means the actually we don't really need to say any more than that. We'll just say which is a better measure of variability, and the MAD, which is smaller at 21.4. So I'm just going to mention that, the mean absolute deviation is smaller than the IQR. We're not really comparing or anything. Again, we're really just making this decision based on whether or not it's skewed. So in this case, it's skewed, so we're going to use the IQR. The IQR is 28, which is better measure of variability than the MAD, which is smaller at the value of 21.4. Okay, so you just want to say which one is better and why you chose it. Okay. All right, that's everything you have to do for your project. Keep in mind your project is going to be unique. It's going to be different from what I did, but the steps and what you need to type and everything like that in order to calculate everything is the same. We should go back and make sure, look, our number of blanks is 0. That means we're done. Awesome. And that'll be it. That's all you need to do for your project, okay? Remember to let me know if you have any questions, and that's all.